Live services, much to the dismay of many of us, are part of gaming now. Originating in the early 2000s with MMOs like World of Warcraft before being popularised in the mid-2010s, the idea of a live service has become one and the same with multiplayer game launches. With Overwatch releasing in 2016 and bringing the model out of the PC ecosystem onto consoles, and then Fortnite leading the charge on the seasonal content model, moulding it into what we see it as today, saturating into so many AAA releases. The free-to-play model flourished with Apex Legends, Valorant, and many more new releases launching with a very similar monetization structure to Fortnite, and even already established premium releases making the shift to free-to-play and a seasonal model. Destiny 2, Counter-Strike, and PUBG, just to name a few. And while it was great that players were having more options of free-to-play games, we can see the live service model start to break, as more and more publishers want to cash in on what they see as an easy success, and the market becomes wildly oversaturated. To stand out as a live service game, you need something special. Sony, traditionally a publisher of high-quality single-player story-driven games, made its statement of intent about pushing into the live service space in 2022, when former CEO Jim Ryan, in a Sony Business Game and Network Services briefing segment, stated they wanted to have published 12 live service games by the end of fiscal year 2025, which would be April 2026. A bold statement which was largely met with confusion and a lot of groans. This was shortly before the finalization of their deal to acquire Bungie, developers of Destiny 2, one of the largest live service games in the industry, for $3.6 billion, which gave them a massive automatic boost into the space. We then saw this vision starting to come into fruition in May 2023's PlayStation Showcase, with several live service game trailers, including Sony's own Helldivers 2, Marathon, and Concord. Looking back at this showcase now kind of feels like foreshadowing, with Helldivers 2 being given the full gameplay showcase treatment, and Concord and Marathon being given cinematic teaser trailers, with no understanding what either of these games would be, with Concord not being shown until over a year later, and Marathon still seemingly in development hell, to this day having no gameplay shown whatsoever. Later that year, in December 2023, a confirmed but unannounced Last of Us live service title was cancelled by Naughty Dog. In a statement on Naughty Dog's blog, the studio stated, "To release and support The Last of Us Online, we'd have to put all our studio resources behind supporting post-launch content for years to come, severely impacting development on future single-player games. So we had two paths in front of us. Become a solely live service game studio, or continue to focus on single-player narrative games that have defined Naughty Dog's heritage." A move that was met with some disappointment from those excited about seeing what was rumoured to be an expanded version of The Last of Us Factions mode, but mostly with relief in the knowledge that Naughty Dog are able to focus on what they do best. It's easy to see the potential fate that Naughty Dog dodged when we look at Bungie, a studio brought in to fulfill Sony's live service ambitions. Bungie has of course been a primarily live service studio long before the acquisition, with Destiny originally releasing in 2014 and the sequel releasing in 2017, both originally published by Activision before the termination of their publishing deal in 2019. This cutoff was largely due to Bungie's contractual obligation to Activision, forcing them to release a new product every year, both full games as well as expansions. Bungie continued their cadence of yearly expansions for Destiny 2, while sunsetting previously released content throughout this period of independence, making the game free to play in September 2019, 9 months after the announced separation from Activision. Prior to Destiny, Bungie was a primarily single-player story-focused studio, with the beloved Halo series, as well as pioneering online games with the arena multiplayer modes that came along with Halo 2, 3, and Reach. Now, under Sony, they are pushing further into live service with the announcement of the previously mentioned Marathon, a series from Bungie's deep history brought back to life as an extraction shooter. We have heard very little about Marathon beyond the original announcement trailers and devlogs back in May 2023. Since this announcement, there have been multiple rounds of layoffs at Bungie, one in late 2023 where around 100 people lost their jobs. Thought to be largely caused by the recent poor performance of Destiny 2's Lightfall expansion, as well as the delay of Marathon, which it was clear had become a difficult project for Bungie to manage alongside the final shape, the supposed last expansion of Destiny 2 also being delayed. And the second happening just last month in August, where a further 220 people were laid off, representing roughly 17% of Bungie's workforce, as stated by Pete Parsons, CEO of Bungie, in an official blog post. While individual projects can be looked at as reasons for these layoffs, they are the result of much deeper economic failings and poor management from both Bungie and Sony. Jason Schreier writes in a report for Bloomberg, "In early 2022, during an era of low interest rates and strong post-COVID sales across the industry, Sony purchased Bungie for $3.6 billion, looking at Destiny 2 as a model for its growing ambitions in live service game. Flush with cash, Bungie hired hundreds of new staff members and pursued myriad incubation projects, including mobile versions of Destiny, remakes of old games, and new franchises. He then goes on to state, during one grim meeting in late 2023, according to the people familiar, Parsons told staff that the company had missed its revenue targets by 45% and was losing money. Bungie delayed the final shape and marathon and subsequently laid off around 100 employees. These failings didn't just lead to job losses though, they also led to Bungie becoming more absorbed into the larger Sony PlayStation ecosystem. Pete Parsons states, "We are deepening our integration with Sony Interactive Entertainment, working to integrate 155 of our roles, roughly 12%, into SIE over the next few quarters." And also adds, "We are working with PlayStation Studios leadership to spin out one of our incubation projects, an action game set in a brand new science fantasy universe to form a new studio within PlayStation Studios to continue its promising development." There is no word so far on whether this new studio and incubation project will be a live service offering, but it is certainly easy to assume that a studio formed from a team of previously live service developers would follow that same path, particularly due to the investment Sony so clearly want to pump into the space. Looking to Firewalk Studios, developers of Concord, we can get a potential look into the future of this offshoot studio being formed. Concord launched on August 23rd after several calls for delays and for Sony to re-evaluate its full-price live service business model to dismal player counts, reaching an all-time peak of 697 players on Steam, according to SteamDB. PlayStation player counts are much more difficult to come by, but we can assume they won't be much better. This has been widely reported on and is being considered one of the greatest failures of a AAA publisher of all time. Shown even more by the fact that the game has now been shut down. On September 6th, servers went offline and refunds were to be given to everyone who purchased the game, a lifespan of just 2 weeks. On a post to the PlayStation blog, game director Ryan Ellis said, "While many qualities of the experience resonated with players, we also recognized that other aspects of the game and our initial launch didn't land the way we intended. Therefore, at this time, we have decided to take the game offline beginning September 6th, 2024, and explore options, including those that will better reach our players." To me, this sounds more like a post-release delay than an outright cancellation. The game has been in development for over 8 years and has cost over $100 million to make. It would be baffling if Sony were not considering all their options for relaunching the game at a later date, presumably with a free-to-play model. And while it would be easy to write this off as just a case of a poorly made or broken game, that does not appear to be the case. Reviews for this game have largely been positive, at least when talking about how the game itself actually plays. Gameplay is reported to be solid. You would expect nothing less from a studio composed of heavyweight developers from games like Call of Duty, Apex Legends, Fortnite, and of course, Destiny. But in a long, oversaturated hero shooter market, solid mechanics alone won't pull players in, and Concord's issues were made clear from the beginning. The first cinematic trailer we saw, beyond the initial vague teaser, was shown at this year's State of Play in May. An incredibly well-animated trailer showing a quip-heavy ragtag group of whatevers trying to get away with stealing something. This trailer instantly put a bad taste in people's mouths. It was pulling from the Guardians of the Galaxy playbook on character writing and world building, something people have grown pretty tired of. It was also not exceptionally clear what the game actually was at this point. This was then directly followed by a proper gameplay showcase, in which it was revealed that Concord was to be a 5v5 PvP hero shooter, very similar to the likes of Overwatch. This was another tick in the audience fatigue box. This, alongside finding out that it was to be a full price game with a live service business model, was what many people will say killed the game there and then. Subsequent betas had very low player counts, and the writing was on the wall for Sony to delay this game and rethink the model to something at least more appealing, if not free to play. This obviously didn't happen, and now the game has, unfortunately, become one of the biggest AAA flops in the history of the games industry. This is where I start to think about the parallels forming between what has happened to Bungie as well as their newly formed offshoot studio, and how Firewalk was built from industry veterans. The circumstances of each studio's founding is not the same, but how Sony may see them as a vessel to push further into live service should be cause for concern, especially following the failure of Concord. It is likely we will see Sony draw back its plans and in the process reassign or lay off more teams. But one of the main reasons Sony clearly pushed too heavily for Concord to release with the model it did is because they probably had faith that the game could speak for itself, much like their surprise success story from earlier in the year, Helldivers 2. The reception to Helldivers 2 upon release in February this year was certainly a nice surprise to a lot of people. After a fairly middling reaction to each new trailer and gameplay snippet, the game certainly looked fun, but not nearly as fun as the full product turned out to be. So how did the game go on to be such a success? Given a pretty short marketing campaign, being originally announced around 9 months before release, and only shown within Sony's State of Play presentations, the game largely went overshadowed among larger announcements and discussions. It focused on the co-op nature of the game, as well as the very Starship Troopers comedic satire that has become synonymous with it. Alongside the gameplay showcasing large hordes of bugs to kill, next to games like World War Z and Earth Defense Force, it gave the feeling of just another third-person co-op action shooter. That feeling was quickly pushed to the side upon Helldivers 2's release. Launching to rave reviews, and with it swiftly being picked up by some of the biggest streamers and content creators in the world, the player count skyrocketed as word caught on that this game was a genuine joy to play, especially with friends. The game felt new and fresh despite its familiar framework. The intense co-op action gave us nostalgia for the good old days of Left 4 Dead and Gears of War's Horde mode. The focus on emergent gameplay moments through gunplay that force you to think about how you were shooting, as well as the bouncy physics of throwing down a stratagem and the often random feeling patterns of massive missile barrages led to some truly hilarious moments of panic. It added twists taken from its predecessor Helldivers 1, a top-down shooter, into a more approachable and familiar third-person format. But this feeling of chaos and hilarious panic couldn't be portrayed in gameplay showcases or trailers, even if they did one of those fake game chat trailer things that seem to happen every now and then. These things could only be made clear to people once the game was released, meaning confidence was needed in the quality of the game by both publisher and developer for the game to be successful. When looking back at Concord by comparison, you can see how there just wasn't enough of a variation on the formula they were pulling from to get significant word-of-mouth buzz around the game. So no matter the quality, people weren't going to be interested in paying full price for a game where they knew they could get the same experience, if not better, elsewhere for free. Makes me think about the launch periods of games like Sea of Thieves or Rainbow Six Siege, where they launched to fairly middling receptions, but they were iterating on established formulas enough for people to take interest and feel a desire to invest in the game to see how it grows. Both of which continue to be massively successful so many years later. It can also be seen how Arrowhead and Sony had confidence in how the game would succeed on launch by how frequent the post-launch updates have been, bringing the community together through frequent major orders, which are large-scale player-base-wide tasks to complete to push forward the in-game progression. These take the shape of liberating certain planets or regions on the star map, and upon completion, players are often rewarded with new unlockable items, such as new explosive stratagems or even a controllable mech. Elements of the game and content clearly planned and created long before launch. This constant connection with the community keeps people engaged in the progress of the game, while also having the game itself change week by week as planets are liberated and new planets become available to play. There have even been narratives built around this progression, with Joel, an actual employee of Arrowhead Studios, who is the game master, as it were, controlling the community progression of the game, being labelled by some as an in-game automaton overseeing the whole operation. This is obviously just some lighthearted fun, but it does show the connection the devs have to the community. This also connects to how the game is monetized. I would consider it to be a pretty soft live service, with fairly frequent releases of war bonds, Helldivers 2's equivalent to battle passes, being the most significant item to be purchasable with real money through premium currency. But with this currency being easily earnable in-game, and with the war bonds never going away. So no matter how long of a break you take from the game, you can always come back and have plenty of progression to work through. Some criticise these war bonds as being pay to win due to them containing player upgrades and weapons, but I think the fact that they're so easily accessed, and with the upgrades being relatively minor overall, these complaints have largely been overlooked. Now, this isn't to ignore the issues that have arisen within the game post-launch. Namely, the game getting massively review bombed on Steam after it was revealed that many players would no longer be able to play the game due to a requirement by Sony to have a PSN account to access the game on Steam, something not required at launch. This would lock out thousands of players in regions where PSN isn't available. People were rightfully angry at this change and made it clear to Sony, with review bombs and player boycotts leading to the decision being reversed, something that hasn't been taken forward into Sony's other PC releases, such as Ghost of Tsushima and of course Concord. How big of an impact this had on leading to Concord launching as it did, I don't know, but I imagine not insignificant. But overall, Helldivers 2 was a massive surprise hit, alongside games like Power World and Balatro gaining massive success out of nowhere, largely due to word of mouth. But the failure of Concord and Sony's push into live service goes far beyond the simple lack of good word of mouth. It's indicative of a massive shift in games and how they are marketed and monetized. The live service isn't a trend in design and development of games, but in the business of games, pushed by executives. And while live services will continue to exist, hopefully they will change, and large publishers won't make wild swings into the space because they think it's guaranteed profit. I don't believe that what Firewalk made with Concord was a malicious or greedy attempt to fleece players for every penny they have. It just came from a publisher that thought they were unbeatable, and that they could release a game in a massively oversaturated market to players who were simply tired of this sort of thing, despite the red flags flying directly in their faces. And unfortunately have left a lot of very talented developers in very difficult positions. We have to assume that Sony is rethinking its live service strategy, and that this will have ramifications far beyond Firewalk Studios and even Sony Interactive Entertainment. Wild mismanagement, overfunding, and a lack of understanding of the state of the live service games industry has caused one of the biggest failures in the history of AAA games, all alongside a massive shift in what players are willing to accept in these games. Word of mouth and unique experiences won out over million-dollar marketing campaigns and treading old ground. But unfortunately, we have seen this sort of thing time and time again in the games industry, and we know that the consequences won't land with the executives pushing for live services. It will land with hard-working developers who put their heart and soul into projects that are left to die. Thanks for watching.